Disney movies on. Why don't
They
they do
actually
that? It'd be so much
technically do have
fun.
exclusive
You can put your
Blu-ray
Disney
players.
movie in your
It's
Disney
just
Blu-ray player, and it'll be so much better. It's like, no, it's the same thing.
No, completely different.
Yes, Mark, you were saying exclusivity is bang.
Yes, I'm actively against exclusivity in video games being a practice that people defend, and I've had many an argument with Jeremy Griggs over it.
Well, I think that exclusivity is a necessity in the marketplace. When you have a console that you're trying to sell, you need things that you can only be on that exclusive console, right?
Hard disagree.
I mean, do you think? Look, the video game world is changing, right? We can all establish that. We all know that it's changing, and the idea of you want to sell your stuff to multiple consoles or whatever, that's fine. With that said, Microsoft is kind of changing the way that they think about exclusivity. And they had an experiment not too long ago where they brought Sea of Thieves over from the Xbox to the PlayStation 5. And that apparently went really well, as there's a rumor that's popped off that coming up very soon, as soon as next week, the idea of a big Xbox exclusive will no longer be exclusive and be brought over to the PlayStation 5, and that is Forza Horizon 5, going from the Xbox to the PlayStation 5. But we're not done yet, because there are other games that are potentially rumored to be going that way. First, let's start there. The idea of Xbox kind of looking at and saying, hey, we're going to play nice, and we're going to sell as many copies as we can on as many consoles as we possibly can. Let's start there. Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm old school where I do like exclusivity. It was kind of fun to, have to play your Nintendo to get your Mario, this, that, and the other. But I'm also, as an Xbox guy, I'm not mad that the exclusives are getting lessened, because I don't really think the exclusives that get put on multiple consoles are that great. Like Forza, all right, I'm not really a Forza guy. Sea of Thieves really wasn't my cup of tea. I think when I think of exclusives, I think of more the Nintendo exclusives, because there's a sameness to other games, and when you kind of put everything on PC, there's about 20 games that look the same. You're like, well, this is this one because it takes place on this planet, or this is that. And that's kind of what I like about exclusives, because there's a uniqueness to a lot of that.
Out of curiosity, though, how would those same games be any different on the platform where they would be exclusive if people would also just buy it on whatever they like? I feel like it just
because you have a
all.
universal set of standards that you need to meet. In terms of like Nintendo, you might argue that the Switch is an inferior system because you can't do 4K ray tracing, or you may not be able to do what you can do on other consoles. But I have more creativity coming at me at that game than I do something that's a multi-plat that's got a couple $100 million on it. Like, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a beautiful game that really maximizes everything you can do with technology. But I still would rather play in the inferior version of Zelda, where it's exclusive to that, because there's just a soul to it. It is original. It's unique. Each console has its own branding, makes it feel like a different thing every time I play their games.
So the counter argument I'd give to that is the difference between the hardware that Red Dead Redemption is running on and the hardware that Tears of the Kingdom, for example, is running on, is just that. It's hardware. Software is the thing that you're saying you like. And if Tears of the Kingdom was a game that was scalable, released on PC, even Xbox and PlayStation, A, it would have sold a lot more, and B, it would run and look way better just scaling that target spec, so it would run the same on Switch.
Something would sell more on something that already has a bigger install base, just because it's a computer. Like me, I have a gaming computer. I'm running it for the channel, but I don't game on this thing.
Yeah,
I have access to all this stuff, but I still choose to be a console gamer.
The thing is, if anyone who wants to give you money is on a different platform, there's not really a business downside to you allowing them to do that, unless your goal is to sell hardware. And as much as Nintendo, I would say, even if their games were not exclusive, I still think the Switch would do quite well, because the value of the Switch was not necessarily the exclusive software, though it did go with a lot of, Breath of the Wild was a launch title, so it had that. But I think most of what made the Switch as successful as it was over something like Wii U, which had very similar exclusives, in fact, a lot of them are the same because they've just been porting the Wii U ones to Switch, I still think because of the form factor and the style of game being unique and interesting. So that is hardware that in it intrinsically has its own value. And It doesn't really matter what kind of software you put on any of the hardware. Ultimately, being able to buy a game means that more people can play it and the people will make more money, which means more of those games will happen. I think the biggest problem is that a lot of people think big publishers need to also have a console when some of them aren't particularly great at developing hardware, even if they're, like Nintendo, phenomenal at developing software and communication.
I'd actually like to say something about this. So,
Okay.
and I feel like Mark is just gonna like absolutely destroy everything I have to say right now, but that's fine.
I know for a fact I've probably thought about this a lot more than most humans have, so I guess
Yes, I
that's
think
probably the
you've
reason.
thought about this more than all of human together. But anyway, I actually miss the days when games were different on each console because
Same.
of like holding things. Like I always had a PC growing up, so I always played the PC version of certain games. But then you go and find out like PlayStation 1 had a different type of version of the same game. And then when PlayStation 2 came out, again, that game was also different and upgraded. And I was like, yo, there are 3+ versions of this game out there. That is awesome. I want to play them all. So I never did because I ended up just watching them on YouTube because I don't have a PlayStation
But
2.
you got to understand, though, the reason for that is that those platform
Because they couldn't hold it,
specifications
yeah.
were so radically different that they need like, those aren't different versions
But I
of the same
missed it.
game. Those are
I mean-
different games being
Oh, yeah.
independently
It's
developed
no,
as
it's
a
the
different
same
thing.
game.
No, it's not. Like, that's
Title.
what I'm trying to get you to stop thinking. It is not the same game. It is a different game where they're trying to adapt the same material, say if it's like a
That's
Harry
fine,
Potter
but
game
I'm
or
just
something.
saying I miss when we had that type of fun stuff with all the different, basically exclusivity. Because
I loved it for the
technically
James
speaking,
Bond
online.
games.
Ultimately,
Well.
it just means you have to buy more plastic boxes to play video games when honestly you
Have you
probably
seen the
have
guy
a
with
plastic.
400 consoles? That's fine.
Sure, and being
look
a console
behind Jeff.
collector
Do you
is
think
a
that's an issue?
Yeah,
You're
you
like,
think Jeff cares about
look
plastic?
at Jeff's
at him.
collection. Like, right?
Well, no, but like I mean, not everyone is a collector, though, right? And like as a person, I collect Star Wars toys for most of my youth. I
That is
understand
why
that
there are
there's people
options
out there who do
You
not
just
have
sound
six
like a
AT-ATs.
first world problem. I have to collect all the different versions.
No,
no, you don't
no.
have
You
to.
don't. I'm saying you shouldn't have to buy additional things that
Why
perform
not?
the same
Why
function
not?
of a device
Why
that you
not?
already
Why not?
own.
Why not?
Because
Why does everyone
okay,
have to have the
why
same
don't
shit?
they make exclusive Blu-ray players that you can only play Sony movies on or Disney movies on? Why don't
They
they do that?
actually
It'd be so much
do have
fun. You
exclusive
can put your
Blu-ray
Disney
players.
movie in your
It's
Disney
region.
Blu-ray player, and it'll be
different
so
argument,
much
Mark.
better. It's like no,
Different
it's the
argument,
same
different,
thing.
No, completely different thing. You're talking about a home. You're talking about a secondary release of a different product. Video games exist to be video games. Those movies are already studio release things. It's
You're
just
putting a
different
disc into
format
a
to
drive
consume.
and experiencing media, man. It's the same thing. It's
But
just you've
that's
been
anything
trained
if you
to
wanna-
think that they
So
should
then
be
the
on different
Nintendo-
devices.
but by that argument, the Nintendo GameCube is exactly the same thing as a PlayStation 2. There's no difference. It's the
I
same
mean,
thing.
from a power standpoint, a little bit, but they also were not developed the same way. So porting between, in particular,
No,
actually,
I
Xbox,
completely
PS2,
understand. I'm just saying I think your logic is hollow on that. You put it's a device, you put a plastic thing in to watch data, because that's anything. That says then
Yes, exactly.
that
Any computer
defeats
that
the
has the
purpose.
ability to run that game should be able to run that game, whoever, not taking into account who you bought it from. And like I think the evidence for that is just the way the PC market works. You don't have games that are exclusive to Nvidia graphics cards, and no one on PC cares. They're still going to buy an Nvidia graphics card over an AMD because they want, say, DLSS, or the pricing of an AMD one's better, so they might go AMD. We would have more competition in the console space if consoles were not individual things that had their own group of like sycophantic followers who just think PlayStation's the best no matter what kind of crap they release, or good stuff. They do good stuff too. It would more be I buy the system that plays video games, which works for me. This is the price point. This is the level of quality I want. This is the maximum resolution for the TV that I own. And this one's for me, while that one's for you. And if games are built to be scalable, all you have to do is set a target specification and say anything less powerful than this will not be able to run this game. And you'd have your 1080p 30 FPS version of a game on the lowest end hardware and be able to run that same game at 4K 120 FPS on a PC or 4K 60 on a PS5, you know? It would be a better world, I'm telling you. And it's going there anyways, and I guarantee you no one's going to...
though. I think you'd have to pull off a bandage for a lot of that to work.
Yeah, and I think the bandage is being ripped off slowly now with PlayStation putting their stuff on PC, Xbox putting their stuff on PlayStation, and Nintendo is probably going to be the last one to go. But right now, as of right now, because the Switch 2 is not out or even officially announced, every single Nintendo game ever made you can play on a PC right now. because there's emulators for every Nintendo platform. So
Wow.
I have
Let's move away
tons of
from
Nintendo
Mark
games that I
trying
can
to
play.
like out himself against Nintendo right
No,
now.
no, no, that's
Come
that's
knocking on
fine.
your doors.
Come
But
after me.
I have
Nintendo,
a
it's fine.
genuine question here. Okay, so there are new games coming out right now that look absolutely shit because they're supposed to come out for Nintendo Switch as well. Don't you think it should have just been omitted Nintendo Switch and have it actually work really well and look well for Xbox,
Yes, yes, but
PlayStation, and
that's
PC?
that's a different thing because they
But
had
that's
to make it.
exclusivity for those
No,
consoles
but the
plus
thing
PC.
is, you don't have to try to squeeze a game that's way too heavy to put on a platform onto that platform. And when they need to make compromises like that, that is literally this gym trying to shove software into hardware that it wasn't meant to run so that they can milk money out of people by selling them a shit version because it's the system they own. Whereas
So
all
isn't
those
that
people
the
just
same
had
thing if you're doing it on PC to just
No.
downgrade it then?
no, because who cares? Like if you don't have a PC that can run that thing, you have the option of either upgrading that part or downloading a mod that can let you scale the settings down to something that
But
your computer can run.
you're also that's why PC gaming and console gaming aren't a one-to-one parity, because you're introducing so many extra elements that can turn off a consumer. You got to remember, not everybody knows what you know or I know or Blabs or Craig knows. There are basic consumers out there that buy video games for kids, and when your install base
Yeah.
is that age group as well, you're going to always have to keep that in mind, and you're going to have to be able to. Families are only going to invest in one thing, and you gotta have to keep that stuff in mind, and the simplicity and the ease of use always goes. That's why
Well, and
Nintendo does have the dominance it does, because it is an easy thing to do.
That is
Boom,
why I think the console market will still exist. The only thing is, it won't be an exclusive operating system running on that console. It'll just be something like SteamOS, the thing that runs on Steam Deck. No console player who's ever touches a Steam Deck is like, oh, this thing's too complicated, because it's just a console style operating system. If that is just the thing that's on yours, you might have people who say, yeah, the PlayStation this year seems like the one that I should get because I just want to hook it into the thing and play. I don't want to deal with mouse and keyboard. I want to be able to set up everything using my controller, and that will still exist. The only thing is they won't have to factor in, but what games does my grandkid want to play? Like, I don't know which one has the games he wants. It'll honestly result in fewer parents giving things to their kids that are like, oh, shit, I wanted to play Helldivers with my friends, and this is an Xbox.
Listen, I have the best answer for all of you, which is an answer from Arch. And he is a PC master race, and he has this statement for you all.
That was awful. I hate you now.
I disagree. That is false.
No.
You're using a clip.
No, that's great. With that said, I do want to bring it back to the point of discussion. And thank you, Mark and Jeff, for the spirited conversation. That's no problem. That's some hardcore gaming right there.
It's time for hardcore gaming.
All right. With that said, I want to bring it all the way back to what we were talking about. And the idea of Sea of Thieves and Forza making their way from the Xbox to the PlayStation. There is one other game that potentially may be announced next week as a part of this. And that is a game that I never, ever, when you speak of exclusivity, would think would make the jump to a Sony console. And that game, according to these potential rumors, would be the Master Chief Collection.
Actually,
Halo,
that was the
Master
first one that was ever rumored to be coming to PlayStation, and that like 2 years ago. There was news that they were tinkering with making a PS5 version of MCC, and it never materialized. But I mean, that's not a surprise to me because honestly, it's probably the first one they should have brought over.
That is, to me, like, look, Master Chief is the face of Microsoft and will always be
Is
the
he?
face of Microsoft. Okay, then who is?
No one.
Right,
They
that's
don't.
what I'm
They
saying.
don't have a mascot right now.
Because Halo's
right now,
fallen
but
off.
yeah, traditionally, Craig's right though. Master Chief was their Mario for.
I mean,
How many
sure,
years?
but again, if all the people playing Master Chief Collection or Infinite right now all of a sudden had a whole big group of players who are now populating the servers and making the game more healthy, I don't see how that's a bad thing for those guys either. Other
Well,
than
nobody
like,
said
oh,
anything
he's
about
our
it being bad.
mascot, now he's on the other team. Boo! It's like, who cares? Who gives a shit? Like you're still
I
playing the game
wasn't
on the
what
system
Craig
you wanted
or
to play.
Jeff said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
didn't, we didn't go there.
I'm saying like the mascot nature is it's kind of irrelevant. It's not something that's really focused on these days. I think the only one now
No, it
with a
is. One
functioning
Nintendo.
Tell that to Nintendo,
okay,
right?
my sentence was the only one with a functioning mascot right now is Nintendo with Mario, because who's PlayStation's mascot? Who's
Right, because
like Xbox's? Who's
Nintendo
Nvidia's?
has
Who's AMD's? Who's
destroyed
Intel's?
Nintendo has destroyed all of their like. There's no reason for them to have mascots because at the end, you know who was Sony's mascot for a long time? Kevin Butler, the fake PR person on
Actually,
the
that's fair.
commercials.
Yeah, he was
right?
funny.
It was a great ad back in the day, but literally since Kevin Butler, we haven't seen an advert like any sort of and PlayStation in general, they've never really had a mascot. For a while, it was like, oh, it was
Crash
Spyro,
Bandicoot.
and
It was
then it was
Crash
Crash
Bandicoot
Bandicoot, right? It was
Bandicoot
Crash-
first. So he was the one that
Right.
did those shit talking outside Nintendo videos, like the commercials.
Right. And you're right, but that was a very small window of time, and then it just kind of like that was like PlayStation 2 era. That was 20 something years ago now at this point.
I believe I can explain why that is.
Well-
It's because video games right now aren't targeted at a demographic that requires something like a mascot in order to like pump up excitement for it. Because it's not the kind of thing where everyone needs a little character platformer that's 3D and something. So Sega needs their Sonic, PlayStation needs their Crash Bandicoot. Now, like with Master Chief being what was effectively the mascot of Microsoft, now it's like, okay, well, their mascot's like a big first-person shooter guy. And the mascot thing sort of started decreasing in importance. And now it's just like everyone plays different types of games. So if you decide to make Aloy the mascot of PlayStation, all the people who don't like Horizon are all of a sudden going to roll their eyes every time a PlayStation commercial comes on with Aloy telling them to buy a game. It's like, well, no, like no one really cares. So just show the games that you're going to show and don't worry about who the most special one to the manufacturer is, you know?
Well, I do think it's interesting. You know, when you look at, I'm just looking at a quick glance on Wikipedia of like Sony mascots over the years. It has Ratchet, Sackboy. Remember Sackboy?
Oh yeah,
be a thing?
Sackboy was
Yeah.
a big deal for a minute.
That was an attempt at them saying, yeah, we need a kid-friendly mascot because mascots tend to pull in kids, right?
Right. Nathan Drake, obviously the exclusivity associated with that. Kratos, Polygon Man, obviously that was like the first one way back in the day when it came to PlayStation. Spyro the Dragon,
remember that.
and now Astrobot is considered like the PlayStation 5 mascot. So, right, exactly. But here's the thing, though: when you talk about these mascots for these different companies, right? You can point to Sony had this, all these mascots over the last 30 years, right? Xbox, their mascot was Master Chief, right? And over the last several releases of Halo, the game has become less and less relevant, right? But Nintendo, on the other hand, there's one mascot. It's Mario, and it has been literally since day one. He's never been more relevant than he is now. You have movies coming out, you have all. So, like, when it comes to the idea of exclusivity, right? Nintendo doesn't need to bring its games over to other consoles. When you buy a Nintendo console,
No
you're
one
buying
does.
it for Nintendo games.
I would just argue that they'd make a shitload more money if they did. Like right now, who's buying a Nintendo Switch to play Breath of the Wild? Breath of the Wild specifically, not just any Zelda game.
Now or ever? Because I
Right
did
now,
back
no,
in
right now.
2017. Well, what are we talking? 7 years ago? Like
Okay. That said, if Breath of the Wild was released on Steam, do you think it would make any money today? It was like, yeah, it's been 7 years. We're going to put Breath of the Wild on Steam to get people into Zelda on Steam. Would that make Nintendo lose money? Or would they
in the
make
future
a
it might
shitload
because
from
it would
that?
no, because here's the thing: if you're a hardware manufacturer and you remove your exclusivity and you give people a reason not to buy your product, they'll sit and wait for PC, and they just won't ever buy a Nintendo. So the Nintendo strategy works because you got to remember too. Microsoft and Sony are companies that make other things. These are just their divisions of another bigger company.
Right.
Microsoft doesn't really care about the gaming. They make Windows and all this other crap. Same with Sony. How many chips and other devices do they make?
The gaming is
these are
Sony's
just
most profitable division, so I think Sony does very much care about the games because it's kind
okay,
of
but the point
saving
is,
them right now.
But they're not. That's not their only thing.
Yeah, I'm aware of that too.
Historically, always known
but
for that.
I would argue that the thing Nintendo, and granted, I earlier on talked about me really liking the design of the Switch, thinking its form factor was pretty revolutionary, and it's the reason why we have things like Steam Deck and the ROG Ally right now. So good on you, Nintendo, for that one. But I would not argue Nintendo as being an incredible hardware manufacturer. They are incredible at making video games. So if it gets to the point that it's like, okay, look, these publishers don't need to build their own box in order to have people play them. Everyone's got things that play video games on them, and we're still going to shoot for the blue water strategy of let's not make our games super heavy and hard to run. Let's make the well designed with good art styles that can scale, that people can buy them if they want to buy our hardware, or if we decide to not make hardware to begin with, people will still be buying Mario games forever. And the only difference will be there'll be the Switch spec, the one that they design it, and it's perfectly designed to run on that. But then anyone who wants to say, okay, 720p, why don't we bump that resolution up to 4K? Okay, 30 FPS cap, why don't we unlock that frame rate? If you can do things like that, that will just make the games run, play, and look better. And I honestly don't think that Nintendo is at the point where their hardware business is the thing keeping them afloat. I think it's the fact that they sell a hell of a lot of games, and they're not selling nearly as many as they could if they had their games on other platforms.
But they're also bigger branded than ever before. Like if Nintendo, that's the bigger picture. Isn't
bigger
just
market
their
still
consoles.
equals more money, no matter how big your market currently is. Like if
But
you
That's
can,
a fair point. But when you have one way, if you control your market a certain way, and it makes your thing much more valuable, and it continues to stay relevant, how many other games will hold their value the same way a first-party Nintendo game does?
again,
We're
that's a
talking
collector
apples and
argument.
oranges here. And when we compare Sony and Microsoft, hold on, we got
most
6
people
minutes.
who play video games aren't collectors who are like speculating on the things that they buy. It's one of the reasons why physical copies are ultimately doomed, even though I think that's kind of a bad thing because having physical copies is good. But they're not going to be able to stick around forever just because they'll become impractical at a certain point. And that will just be a huge blow to collectors specifically, although it might actually help them because games will get even more rare. But sorry, go ahead, Craig.
Norm is hitting something here that I think is lost here, right? He says, to be honest, I think if Mario and Zelda went multi-platform, I would feel like something special would be lost. To me, it'd be like a Ferrari being sold in a Toyota dealership. Something just feels off about it, right?
I mean, like, again, it's, I don't want to sound
It's
like
business,
Shapiro,
bro.
but it's like the facts don't care about, like, I mean, yes, it might be like, oh, it's not a Nintendo platform. There's something a little different about this, but that is in your head. Like
But
fundamentally.
no. That's about marketing and branding, man. That is completely not in your head. That is exactly how
the thing
you run
is,
a whole business.
I
If you
don't
take
think
that
the
out of your
argument
business-
could be made.
Mark,
that,
let Jeff talk.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
What I'm saying is like that is the core of what a business is. And if you get rid of your business identity for this like open source world crap, that kills a business. And then everything that goes that route. You will not hold on to anything special. Everybody just kind of rolls into the one. Let's put it on Steam. Let's max out the specs. That's it. It's just another bunch of files on a bigger platform. A Nintendo thing is something special. And when you change that, it's all about the branding. It's about the package. It doesn't matter if it's the most powerful, and it doesn't matter if it has the biggest install base. They, when everybody else was having an issue, they were cash solvent. They are always moving forward because they march to their own beat of the beat of their own drum, and they don't focus on trying to do things. I don't even like Nintendo. They're not even my favorite company, but you can't argue that their brand is super strong. And because of the things they do and have done, it keeps them there, and it's good business.
I think their brand is strong enough that if they were still just making games and still targeting the same low specifications and focusing on things like gameplay and not doing big cinematic, like, oh, look, you can see the peach fuzz on her face graphics, and they weren't making a console and it was just like any console you have, the new Zelda game comes out and you can play it, I don't see that as a world where people are not going to buy Zelda. They'll be like, oh, Zelda, it's on everything now. I don't care. It's like, no, it's Zelda. Zelda's huge. People will still buy it. People still buy Mario games. They'll still want to play Mario Kart. If you make cross-play Mario Kart, that's more Mario Kart players you can play with around the world. I just don't see the value in it beyond, well, it's always been that way and it's nice. It's like, that's a weak argument, though. It's hard to prove that.
See, but here's the thing you're missing is I guarantee a company like Nintendo has done the research on this. What if we were to release on PC? What if we were to release on Xbox or PlayStation and did release Mario Kart on it? What would it look like for our business? And
so you're saying like Nintendo doesn't make stupid decisions, Craig?
Listen, there's a reason why they can not make $1 for the next 150 years and still be profitable, right? And still, like they are a company that is destroyed the video game industry in a good way over the last 40 years. They literally built the modern video game industry, right?
Yeah, and I like Nintendo games. Three of my favorite games of last year were Nintendo games. I'm not knocking Nintendo's ability to make good games. I just don't necessarily think the hardware they make is usually anything that's special, which again, with the exception of Switch being a pretty big deal as far as form factor goes. But in general, it's like Nintendo's just got the weakest hardware that often has a gimmick that most people don't want to use, like the Wii U touchscreens, or to a degree, the motion controls on Wii, which were revolutionary and definitely help with things like VR interface now. But I still think that's ultimately what made Wii not the kind of game where hardcore gamers would want to use as their primary console, because most people just didn't like the motion controls.
Well, no, and on top of that, it wasn't a very strong console. Just technically, it wasn't a very. It didn't stack
I
up
don't
to the
think that
PlayStation 3
matters.
or the Xbox 360. Well, no,
Neither
it
did
does.
me.
When you go back and you look at Call of Duty on the Wii versus the PlayStation 3 and the 360, it very much matters, right?
But how does Call of Duty play on the Wii?
Like crap.
Well, I mean,
There
yeah,
you
like
go.
crap.
Oh, sorry.
But
There
at
you
the
go.
same time, but it goes by, like, if you see gameplay of it on YouTube, or you see a screenshot of the 360 version versus the Wii version, and the Wii version looks like Roblox, right? compared to the 360 version, which looks like a Ferrari, right? Like that's your first impression of the game. You don't even have a chance to get to the point of how does it play, right? It has to look good visually.